Hello all and welcome to the Heritage Alliance's Heritage Debate 2020. The Heritage Debate is an annual event that the Heritage Alliance uses as a springboard for discussion on topics currently affecting the sector. This year, we're exploring how young people can engage with heritage and how the sector can support and empower these young people to become advocates for heritage into the future. We have to acknowledge there are and will continue to be huge impacts on society due to COVID-19, the Black Lives Matter movement and social inequality, as well as climate change and Brexit. And we want this event to be a discussion space for how these factors and others will affect young people's ability to engage with heritage. My name is Daniella and I'll be one of the co-chairs for the debate, and you'll be hearing more from myself and my fellow co-chair Alison Purkiss a bit later. But first, a little bit about the Heritage Alliance. So we're a charity and we promote the central role of independent heritage, the independent heritage sector. We're a membership body with over 150 heritage organisations as members currently, which is very exciting. And they cover the breadth of heritage organisations from National Trust all the way through to small organisations like Benefit in Peril. And the main work of the Alliance is to influence the government on behalf of the independent heritage movement and facilitate connections and communications between the organisations both within and outside the sector. We also run capacity building and support projects. For example, our National Lottery Fund Heritage Funds project, which is rebuilding heritage, and another project we're currently running on digital skills support for the heritage sector, which is called Heritage Digital. And before we start, a bit of housekeeping as well. So I think people have started to do it already, but feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box and make sure to select all panelists and attendees when you post, otherwise not everyone will be able to see who you are. And we'd love to know what organisation you're with and why you're joining. If you have any sort of extra things to add in as well, that'd be brilliant. The recording will be publicly available after the event and we'll email it to everyone who signed up. And we're also, for the first time, live streaming this on Facebook, so lots of new tech for us this year, and so welcome to anyone joining us there. We're using AI captioning as well for this event, so for those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen you should be able to see an option to turn on closed captions, and then you'll be able to see the captions there. As part of the lead up to this event, we put out a call to young people aged 16 to 24 to write up blogs about what heritage means to them. And we received 12 fantastic submissions on, again, another bit of new tech for us, which is a blog page. So that's available, that we emailed around to all of the attendees, but you can find that on our website as well. And we'll also post a link to those in the chat. So you'll be able to catch up on those if you haven't seen them already. They're really, really excellent. There'll also be an opportunity for Q&A in the latter part of this afternoon. So if you put your questions in the box marked Q&A rather than the chat box, we'll be able to get back to you as many questions as possible. We'll be monitoring those, and we had a few pre-submitted ones as well, so we'll be able to run through those towards the end of the session. And finally, the Heritage Alliance will be live tweeting throughout this event via at heritage_NGOs, which I think is on some of the slides as well, so you should be able to see that. And please get involved. We'd love to know your thoughts about the event, and use the hashtags #Heritage Debate and #UnderHeritage to sort of join in the chat. And now I'm really pleased to hand over to our chairman, Peter Ainsworth. He'll introduce the topic for today. So handing over to you, Peter.
Hello. I hope everyone can hear me. This is the first time we've done this in this way. Everybody is extremely welcome. And Danny, you mentioned the amazing blog site that we've got going. I absolutely love it. And I'm just going to quote from it, actually. And the quotee will know who I refer to, but it's invidious because they're all so good. But I just wanted to say this: the world may have changed immeasurably since Stonehenge was constructed, but stories of human determination and vision remain as relevant as ever. And I think that's one of our key messages. So as I say, you're all incredibly welcome. The title of the debate is Creating Lifelong Supporters. It's got a question mark after it. I suspect that most people who are on this call are already supporters. And I also think that once you've got the whole thing about heritage, you never lose it. It's always there for you. And the question, I suppose, is how do we encourage more people to get involved. My passionate view is that heritage isn't just about old stuff. It's very relevant today, and there are plenty of examples of why. And it's not just for old people, which is why I'm so pleased we're hosting an event which is designed to encourage young people to get involved. And I'm deeply grateful to everyone who has been involved in that. And so this is the theme of our debate, creating long lifetime supporters, ? I need to, and I want to, thank Ecclesiastical, who are our corporate partners, for sponsoring the whole thing and for their continuing support, and the sector more widely, in fact. And I want to thank all our speakers, both the co-chairs who have got a challenging task ahead in the next couple of hours, and everyone who's contributed to this event. We're very keen at the Alliance on follow-on, so it's not just a one-off thing. It should have, and must have actually, a relevance and a resonance that goes on beyond the event itself. And we very much encourage people to continue to communicate over this issue, but also, by the way, in 2018, we had a debate about diversity and inclusion. And that's still very much a live thing to talk about. So if any of you who are tuning in have thoughts, ideas, experiences of how the sector is progressing about those very relevant issues now, we'd love to hear them and contact Iona at the Heritage Alliance in order to do so. Now, to set the scene for what I hope will be a very enjoyable and also informative and shared experience, we have a video created by 4 of the English Heritage young producers. And that's funded by the National Lottery. Thank goodness for the National Lottery. The Shout Out Loud programme, which they've been running. It supports 11 to 25-year-olds across England in exploring what heritage means to them, and to get involved in what matters to them, and to tell each other and everybody else who's interested, and I think lots of people are, in what counts for them. So I hope this goes well. I hope you enjoy it. I hope it's interesting. I hope it has followed through. And now over to our video people and the Shout Out Loud.
What is Englishness is one of the key questions that we have to ask here. Who are the English? What is England? And what is its history? It's these sorts of questions that can only be defined by looking backwards and seeing where we've come from, and then looking at where we're going based on that.
Hi, I'm Lucy, I'm 21 and I live in Suffolk and sometimes Birmingham because I'm a student at university here. I study English literature. I first got interested in history mainly through reading books set in the past. I joined the Young Producers because I feel like a lot of young people feel disconnected from discussions around heritage and history, and I hope that as young producers we can try and involve as many people as possible and make discussions around heritage a lot more diverse. I also joined because I quite like a career in the heritage and culture sectors, and so being a young producer was the best opportunity to kickstart this. I think one of the challenges involving young people in heritage today is maybe that young people are more interested in technology and new innovations, and they think that maybe the past doesn't have much of an impact on the present today. I disagree with this. I think the past has a very significant influence on how our society acts today, but I don't think all young people think this. In my experience of history at school, I think we focused a lot on very specific narratives and very big events in history, which, while they are really important, I think they don't apply to a lot of people. A lot of people feel that they couldn't see themselves in history and therefore they're disinterested in it. I think this applies especially to a lot of people who feel like they've been marginalised in history and they are still feeling the effects of that in society today. I think also English education does highlight a lot to do with English greatness, and while we did do a lot of heroic things in the past, there was also a lot of downfalls, and the results of these are still being felt by marginalised people in society today, and so I think that is something that needs to be re-evaluated and readdressed. I do feel that sometimes heritage sites treat youth engagement as a kind of box ticking exercise, and because they don't want to alienate a pre-existing base of people visiting their sites, they maybe just do a one-off event for young people rather than making fundamental changes in the way they present heritage and heritage sites.
Hello, my name is Tatenda Naomi Machai. I'm 22 years old. I live in southeast London and I'm a recent graduate from the European Theatre Arts course at Rosebery College of Theatre and Performance. At secondary school, I loved history. It was one of my favourite subjects. I took it on into A-level, but I didn't take it on into uni. Over the last 3 years, history has found its way back into my life through my research in oral traditions and African history pre-colonization, looking specifically at South Africa and Zimbabwe, which was the country I was born in. Since then, history has made its way back into my life in a big way. I joined Young Producers because I worked on a project with Shout Out Loud during summer of this year, and it was a project about the Haitian Revolution which really sparked my mind alight with a lot of knowledge that I was unaware of and a lot of history in this country of England that I was not aware of. And after that project I was like, I want to be involved in an organisation that makes this happen, that makes history accessible, exciting, even heart-wrenching for young people like me. I think it's important for this generation to be involved in heritage, as recent events have shown us what a lack of knowledge of our inherited traumas and inherited stories can do. It leaves us longing for a root, uncertain of where we've come from and how we've got here. And I think that this generation is ready to deal with the good, the bad, the ugly of our history and stitch together a sense of self and nation through healing. I think one of the biggest challenges in involving young people in heritage is accessibility. So this could be accessibility in time, specifically for working class young people who are probably already working part-time, because I was when I was 16. The ability to carve out free time to be exploring heritage without it paying is tricky. And also accessibility in the sense of visibility, especially when it's hard to feel like you can participate in something that you don't see yourself present within, especially within the heritage sector. It's very few people look different. So you start thinking, that sector's not for me, I'm not welcome here. My biggest annoyance with history in education is the lack of a full history in our education systems. I don't think we get taught everything that we need to know to understand the realities of life today in England. From primary school to secondary school, it's a very cherry-picked version of our shared histories. And of course, since the history is shared, I wonder why it doesn't reflect the classroom in which it's teaching to, because all of those mixed heritage histories and stories are very much a part of the very fabric that makes England what it is. For what is post-World War II England without the help of the Windrush generation? Which raises the question, why aren't these histories included in our curriculum today? The best experience I've had with young people and heritage was with Shout Out Loud over this summer, where we explored a project with art historians, sound artists, theatre makers and writers to bring to life a historical event. And interdisciplinary attempts to explore historical events get me excited. I love seeing a story interpreted through different mediums and through different lenses. I think then it can really live and breathe and do something to someone.
Hello, my name is Niles. I am a young producer with the English Heritage Shout Out Loud project from Suffolk. I am also a branch assistant with Culture to Young Archaeologists Club, and I am a volunteer with Parham Airfield Museum. I am very interested in history. I'm doing my A-levels at the moment. One of them is, of course, history, and I've been interested in history from a very young age. So when I was about 4 or even 5, I really got interested in dinosaurs. I think everybody did at that age, but I sort of stayed with it. I know that's more paleontology than history, but then I moved forward into loving the more recent history. I mean Romans, which are more recent than dinosaurs, obviously, but since then I've become even more interested in even more recent periods of history, especially the 20th century, as it's so relevant today. And also I love military history, which you've got so much of that in the 20th century. So I wish I could say the reason why I became a young producer is because I really wanted to make a change, but unfortunately that's not the case. I simply joined because I love history, I love museums, I love the heritage sector, and I thought these bring it all together and it might be something really fun to do, which is why I joined. And making changes in how young people perceive history is a handy perk, which is really quite nice. Now, if you were to ask me what's the biggest challenge involving young people in heritage, it's simply because I know most of my friends would think that's a very boring thing. Of course, I know it's not boring, and you know it's not boring, but it's very difficult to try and persuade trendy teenagers that it isn't boring, and that's one of the biggest bridges that needs to be gapped. I think horrible histories went a bit of a way when they were younger, but it's more difficult when they get older and they start forgetting what fun times they had watching those programmes. Now I think we can all agree without too much controversy that the biggest scourge in the heritage sector is Mel Gibson. It's simply that. I mean, it's not just him, it's historically inaccurate films in general. People leave from watching Braveheart and they think that William Wallace actually wore kilts and the blue face paint, which is more associated with the Celts. Not only that, don't even get me started on The Patriot, because I'm going to start getting angry. Pearl Harbor is another one I really dislike. Not only that, but U-571 is also a really historically inaccurate film, which makes me cringe every time I watch it.
Hello, my name is Tori, I'm 23 and I live in Cardiff. I'm currently doing a part-time Masters in History while also working at Tesco. I'm extremely interested in history, of course, literature and roller skating. I've always loved history and my interest continued to grow while I did my undergrad history degree. What I focus on always seems to fluctuate, from women's history to black civil rights to materiality in museums, and now mostly environmental history. I joined the Young Producers while still doing my undergrad because I wanted to broaden my knowledge in the museum and heritage sector. Once I found out more information about the scheme, I was really keen to join because I appreciated the goals that English Heritage had set for themselves by incorporating young producers. Heritage and untold histories are something that should be a shared public knowledge, not something that is reserved for the privileged few. Heritage is having a moment in the news or social media and in current political movements. So it's really vital for young people to have an involvement with heritage. For example, with the Black Lives Matter movement and Welsh and Scottish independence receiving a new surge of momentum, it's important for young people to recognise these histories in the built environment and also begin to notice how different this point of view of history is to what they might have learned in school. I get so frustrated with the ways that school curriculums teach history and heritage because they don't include anything that's interesting, fun, or relatable. It's all about drilling exams and luck of the draw with a good teacher. Recently, I've been so excited about British history being brought into public discourse. More and more than ever, I see people sharing information or videos on Twitter and Instagram concerning history. I've seen more news articles being posted and shared, and I've witnessed people who I know didn't take an interest in history in school wanting to open up a discussion about history or about heritage. For anyone debating youth engagement in heritage, I'd like to ask, how much different do you think your reaction to certain events, your understanding of a shared social history, or even your sense of belonging might be if you knew more about heritage while growing up, either a heritage that relates to you or relates to people who are different to you?
If the role of heritage organisations is to find those marginalised in society and to promote their stories, is it not also to acknowledge the actions of those who created the marginalisation and inequality of those people? Do we condemn the people that created these circumstances due to their actions, or do we merely pass inequality off as a product of the times in which people lived?
So for anybody debating in youth engagement in heritage, I want you to think very carefully about how we perceive history and where we get our facts from. Let's use Richard III as an example. How do we know about him? What are the main sources? Are they biased sources or are they ones to be trusted? Are they good sources or are they not? I want you to think very carefully about where they come from and whether people may have an ulterior motive for writing what they do or what they don't write.
If you want to talk about youth engagement in the heritage sector, then we must talk about youth engagement in history within education. Are we learning something that engages us in our classrooms? Is it representative of the people who are in the classrooms? Are we inspired by the histories that we hear, or do they put us to sleep?
That was absolutely fantastic. We're really, really thankful to Lucy, Tatenda, Niles and Tori for sharing those insights with us. And it was a really fantastic presentation. I'm going to introduce myself properly now, and also my co-chair, Alice Purkiss. So I'm Daniella Briscoe-Peaple. I'm Advocacy and Communications Officer at the Heritage Alliance. And I'm currently one of the organisation's longest serving members, despite being one of the youngest. I started as an intern in November 2018, and before that I worked with Historic Houses. I started on a training placement there through Historic England. I have a degree in classics from the University of Cambridge, and I taught Latin and French for a year before starting a career in heritage, because I wanted lots of more heritage and museums in my life. And as well as working for the Heritage Alliance, I'm currently studying for a master's degree in museum studies at the University of Leicester. So I have a foot in both camps of sort of working and studying. And I'm delighted now to welcome my co-chair Alice Purkiss as well, who's going to tell you a bit more about herself.
Thanks, Danny, and hello everybody. I'm delighted to have been asked to co-chair this event with by the Heritage Alliance today with Danny. It's a topic that's really close to my own interests and one that I can't wait to dig into deeper with our panellists shortly. I'm Alice Purkiss and I'm the National Trust Partnership Lead at Oxford University, where my team and I facilitate interdisciplinary research, knowledge exchange, public engagement and training at both institutions and beyond. Alongside my work at Oxford, I'm a CLAW Emerging Leader and Oxford Preservation Trust Awards Judge, a member of the Heritage Alliance's Digital Learning and Skills Advisory Group and co-convener of the Heritage Pathway Graduate Training Programme at Oxford University. Prior to joining Oxford in 2016, I worked at the British Library, Tate Britain and the Charleston Trust, where I undertook a curatorial traineeship supported by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. So we would now like to invite our panellists to come onto screen with us, and Danny and I are going to ask them to introduce themselves. So panellists, if you can all come on the screen, perfect. Turn your cameras on and your microphones. So welcome everybody. I'd like to start by asking Alison first to introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Alison Bowyer. I'm the Executive Director of Kids in Museums. Kids in Museums is a national charity dedicated to making museums, historic houses, galleries, any kind of heritage site better for families, children and young people to visit. By young people, we mean anyone right from tiny babies in arms right up to under 25s. So thinking about the whole experience as a visitor and then an employee, hopefully in heritage. We have a core programme including a manifesto, an award for the best museum for families to visit in the UK, takeover day when children and young people take over adult jobs in museums for the day, and a programme of training and resources for everyone working in museums. Thank you for inviting me to be here today. I think this is a really interesting and important topic and I'm looking forward to exploring it further.
Thank you, Alison. We're really, really delighted that you're part of the panel today. Next up, we have Anna. Anna, can I invite you to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi. So my name is Anna. I'm a youth engagement researcher and consultant. I previously worked with the National Trust on sustainable youth engagement strategies, followed by a placement at Heritage Open Days on a fabulous project called New Wave, which aims to bring audiences under 35 closer to heritage through experiential events and co-created strategies. Also, I would say that my focus is very much on digital, which also led me to collaborate with the Heritage Alliance on Heritage Digital this summer. So you'll be hearing lots about digital from me throughout this debate, which I'm very excited about.
Thanks, Anna. And we have two more speakers. So Anita, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Anita Kerwin-Nye. I'm the Executive Director at the Youth Fostering Association, YHA. My job there is many things, including our engagement programme, but also our fundraising, our income generation, our trading. What you will inevitably hear during this call is my children. You can probably hear them in the background now. So I brought real children to a debate on access here. And if the time permits, we might ask them a question about what they think about heritage and how they access it. Because I think it's really important that we get voice from very little from very young all the way through. At YHA, we have about 1 million people a year stay with us, and we connect them to heritage sites, to natural heritage, to museums, to arts and culture. And what we're quite keen on is looking at how we can take that incidental connection to heritage, which they often get for staying with us, to something that's more in depth and comes back to their lives. So our apologies again when you hear children, but you'll probably see them at some point in the next hour and a half as well.
Brilliant. And last but not least, Grace, please.
Hi, I'm Grace Connelly. I'm the Training Officer and Scotland Officer at the Society for the Protection of Ancient Buildings. My role involves organising all the Society's continued professional development courses and workshops. As Scotland Officer, I work with the committee to plan events, and I'm a contact person for members in Scotland. Though, of course, a lot of things have changed this year. We have planned a host of activities to engage with a wide range of young audiences this year, including 2 working parties with engagement from local schools and groups like Scouts, university careers fairs and children's building activities when we do various visits to sites. In my other role, I'm also Europa Nostra UK Support Officer, which is I work with a committee to facilitate the European Heritage / Europa Nostra Awards, the 7 Most Endangered programme in the UK, and we organise various events, and I am also a contact person for Europa Nostra members in the UK. I'm currently working on with a fellow committee member on a Young Members Initiative with Europa Nostra to organise regular roundtable discussions about key topics with a heritage professional. And these are online, free and open to all young people interested in heritage, and the previous session was really great, so it's good to be involved with young people in my work as well. I have a degree in art and architectural history from the University of Edinburgh, and I hope as a young person working in heritage today I can offer a useful voice in the debate, and I'm very thankful to the Heritage Alliance for the opportunity to speak for my passion for heritage and getting young people involved in it.
Thanks so much, Grace. And if we were all together in person, we'd all be having a very big round of applause. So at the moment, a virtual round of applause for our brilliant panel for today. So to kick off the debate, the discussion, I'd first like to ask our panelists what they thought of the young producers' films. And in particular, if they have any key reflections on the provocations that we were given. They were really brilliant provocations, and we're really keen to hear from our panelists what you all thought. So can I ask Anna to kick us off? Anna, what were your key responses?
I think first of all, and I think this sort of echoes quite a lot of the feelings that I've been seeing in the chat as well. It's amazing to see such passionate young people talking about heritage in such eloquent and very thoughtful and insightful ways, each offering very different perspectives. I think the one that really struck a chord with me was the last one around education. I think it's definitely a missed opportunity not to include more diverse narratives when we talk about history, and I think that would open up so many doors to also having a more diverse, young and representative audience for heritage in general, definitely.
Great, thanks, Hannah. And I think, really the work that the Royal Historical Society were doing a couple of years ago, their report into the race, ethnicity and equality report that really looked at entry levels into history and diversifying the student offer was really, that really resonated there. Grace, Anita or Alison, do either of you want to come in next with your reflections?
I just want to say, as both an ex-teacher, as a parent, I think remarkable inputs. There are a few bits of work that are going on around this at the moment. There's a big piece of work around decolonising the curriculum in schools, which is happening, led by teachers and young people, around how we look at, he, usually, who holds the pen, writes history. There's a big piece of work being looking at that around BME, communities and voices, but women. And one of the particular areas of interest for me, we talk a lot rightly about Black Lives Matters, we talk rightly around other inequalities. For me, as a specialist in access, but particularly around SEN and disability, we don't talk a lot around disability in heritage either, both in terms of access or in terms of the stories that we tell in heritage. So that piece around voice, that piece around stories, the piece around access, I thought that came across really well from everybody, and I think it's a really important question. The piece around making history fun, I'm a science teacher. Science is much easier to make fun than heritage. I say a heritage debate, you can blow things up in science. Actually, heritage is fascinating. My kids love it, but I don't call it heritage and I don't call it history. So is there something about the way we package this here that we're actually making it sound more serious and more difficult than it actually is? So I would say brilliant provocations. I would say access in the round. And I would say, look at some of the great work. There's a whole bunch of teachers out there that are with this, history teachers and others, who are saying that we need to rewrite history, not to rewrite what happened, but to make sure that other voices come up. And I would argue, again, from a science perspective, actually that's true about the heritage of science as well. So they're all interrelated, but no, brilliant questions, thank you.
Just picking up on that theme of fun, I wondered, Alison, is that a point where you might like to come in and reflect? I'm sure Kids in Museums, fun is really at the heart of the work that you do.
Yeah, I was really struck by what Tatenda said about telling stories that don't put people to sleep. I know we did a literature review a couple of years ago and we looked at studies of young people's perceptions of museums. And one that always sticks with me is they were asked to characterise them as animals, and walrus was the top choice. I don't know. I think I know what that says about museums. So yeah, I think there's a real danger of like sort of putting heritage sites up on this kind of pedestal that they should be educational and sort of almost a little bit medicinal, but actually they can be fun, and fun, having a social experience, enjoying yourself is a really important reason why families and young people visit museums. So yeah, I really think that we shouldn't forget that people go to these places to have a good time, and often I think if you're an adult not having a good time, it's unlikely anyone's having a good time. We're not all that different.
And Grace, I wondered if with your kind of multiple hats, Grace wears so many different hats, you're an incredibly impressive young person in heritage. I wonder, you know, were there any provocations that really struck you in particular, maybe with your SPAB hat on or your Europa Nostra, although hopefully they'll all be very similar.
Yeah, I think what struck me about all of them, which for one were absolutely wonderful and what a great initiative, was how they all kind of summarise quite well the broader issues that are involved with youth and heritage, be it contested legacies and poor selective history, shall we say, and also the mention of horrible histories was certainly something I had thought about when thinking about engaging people between young school age to university level. How do we capture that? And it certainly links back to what Alison was saying about history and heritage being fun and how to continue that. And it was wonderful to hear from them. And I think the things that they were saying just are the undercurrent of what young people in heritage have to say. And I think now is the time for action. So we know what they say. We know that nothing that said was surprising. So how do we take it forward and how do we make actions from this in heritage organisations?
I think that's a really important call to arms there about actually actioning the discussion, and hopefully we can bear that in mind throughout this session this afternoon. I think those provocations were brilliant, and I think we'll be taking them back to our students in Oxford and asking them to interrogate them further. But I know they've gone into the chat box, so we'd encourage everybody who's watching today, if you want to carry on that discussion, maybe keep going in the chat or keep going on Twitter if you're a Twitter user, because I know that there's a lot more that we could say about that. Talking about opening it up, making it a bit more interactive right now, we'd really like to invite everybody watching now to join in with sharing some reflections to a question we'd like to throw out to you all. We're going to put a link in the chat box, or there it is, to a Mentimeter. So we would like you to put in some responses to the following question, and it's going to appear magically on screen as a beautiful word art cloud. I haven't heard of word art for about 10 years, 15 years, so that's great. We're getting the word art back in. So the question is, what do you think the key barriers are to young people trying to engage with heritage or the heritage sector? So if you could go onto the link into your browser, and it should pop up with the question with some spaces for you to add your answers in. And there we go, some of them are coming in now. the more responses we get that are the same, the words are bigger. So we'll see the key trends that are coming through. But I think with these word clouds, the really interesting answers are also those smaller words that are around the outside that can often tell us more about the challenges. Beyond, there we go, money and time are always at the center. Really interesting. Thank you, everyone. Keep bringing them in, keep entering your responses, and this is going to continue growing. So it's got so big I can almost not see it in my own screen. I'm a bit sad to see boring is coming up there, but hopefully that's going to get a bit smaller actually. Okay, so it's moving very quickly, but money, class, time, access, and transport, I guess, is a very connected one there. Relevance is really big, and I think that's really a really important theme that came through actually in those the young producers films there. Trying to have a look at some of the smaller ones. We've got things around messaging, so maybe communicating the offer. I'm interested in not seen as cool, but I don't know what cool is, so maybe we need to get them back onto screen to tell us what they think. I think that the point around class is really interesting, about access, interesting around lack of digital, and we'll be talking about that later in our discussion. Wonderful. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. This is going to continue growing, I think, for a while. And I think we'll probably be leaving it on screen for a second while I pass over to Danny to ask the next question.
Thanks, Alice. Yeah, this is fascinating. I quite like the fact that it's sort of moving and shaping in front of us. Our second question is, heritage organisations often ask young people to engage with them and their programming. And we wanted to know if there's a hazard in this ask that organisations are not prepared to hear what young audiences really want, and how can heritage organisations be better at preparing for delivering what young audiences really want? So Alison, would you like to come first and try to answer this question?
Thank you. I had quite a lot. I was thinking about this question, and I think there's a few things that I would say. I think first of all, there's a danger of seeing all young people as a homogenous group and that they all want the same things, and also setting up some kind of opposition that's a bit them and us. We have to go and consult young people about young people's things, not any other things, just young people's things, and we'll decide what the young people's things are before we ask them, which I don't think is a great way to go about things. I also think there's a conversation to be had about kind of how you, if you're asking young people all the time for their expertise, how you value that expertise and how that expertise is compensated. Whether there, I don't know what the right answer to this question is, but I think there is a question about at what point you think about whether you pay young people for some of the consultation that they do to make it more accessible and get a broader range of voices involved. I think in terms of setting up consultation, you have to be really clear about the expectations so that you're not setting it up to fail. If they ask you for a load of things that it was never possible to deliver from the start, it's a sort of consultation for the sake of it rather than a genuine conversation. So I think expectations at the start are really important. And I also think that it's important to think about, in the longer term, setting up a process so you're always working alongside young people. You're not just going out and consulting them on projects. They're a part of your organisation. So whether that's through having some kind of advisory panel, having them on your board of trustees. So it's not that you need to best prepare. They're a part of your thinking, so you're always thinking about them. And that to me would be sort of at the heart of it. Having them always in your plans, always in your thoughts, and always getting their voices at the start of everything you're thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really important point, isn't it? I think it's something we even thought about seeing this event together. We're really conscious that we can't sort of speak for people in the sector if we don't know what young people actually think, and trying to get some of that evidence again. I think there's so much more that we could learn, and definitely working with young people in projects from the beginning and really listening is really important. Does anyone else have any sort of response to this question?
Just two practical suggestions. One, really good to hear that the power issue, the power imbalance is fundamentally what's one of the biggest challenges here. And so for YHA, we've just proactively recruited our first under 26 trustee for some time. I think you can't get away from the fact that if you haven't got young people and they're one of your prime users on your board, then the power imbalance is wrong. So they're not there as the young trustee, they are there as a trustee that's equal to everybody else. So I think the more across organisations we get under 26s, under 30s, depending on what you call young nowadays. For me, anybody under 50 is young at the moment, but certainly under 26s onto boards, that does matter. And it's hard, and people are reluctant to give up that power. And even at YHA that was open to it, it was really hard to get people to see that that was both important and that young person wasn't there as a supernumerary or just the young person's voice. But they actually sit on our audit and risk committee. They don't sit on the young person's committee. So it's really important. The second is an idea we're working on, and I'm working on under Every Child Should, which is about 2 points in the life where I think we should give public money to access heritage. One, I think every parent of a 5-year-old should get a heritage sum, that in that year they can buy a heritage pass, access to heritage sites, heritage activities, and we give that money to the user. So we give that money to the family, and that would force the institutions that want that cash to be more family and child friendly. The second point is at 16. I think when kids leave 16, they should be given a heritage amount, £500, £1,000, she said, pushing her luck with the Chancellor. And I think that amount, again, should be about access to heritage, whether that is buying annual passes, life memberships, whether that's accessing heritage, culture and arts, because those two things give away the power, and the power sits with governance and it sits with cash. So those are pretty radical, the latter. But if we do that, that just maybe puts things into people's minds that they might not have considered before.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. It's all about sort of changing ways of thinking, and I think and ways of working as well. I think that's definitely on people's minds in the current situation, in particular at the moment. Did anyone else from the panel have something quickly to chip in with this one? Great.
Yeah, I just I really echo Alison's talking, and both of them actually, about having young people at trustee level. I think it's a lot about direct engagement and exposure. I think if you have a young person on your board who is repeatedly interjecting into strategy and thoughts of the general organisation of organisations, you're less likely to be surprised by ideas, and you're also more likely to value their voice and be prepared to take risks when they propose programming and ideas, and I think that's how heritage organising can prepare and continue to prepare for change, and as Anita quite said, radical change, and kind of flipping heritage on its head and thinking about how to change things. And that will not happen if trustees are full of people who've perhaps been there for 15 years or are all of the same age category or class category or race or any of the things that come up in equality and diversity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of those things were coming up in the word cloud as well, weren't they? Just thinking about access as well as engagement. It's really, really important. I'm going to pass over to Alice for the next question.
Thanks, Danny. So the next question is around language and terminology. So we'd like to ask you, does the word heritage resonate with young people? How can we better communicate what heritage is and what heritage means to younger audiences? And I'd like to ask Grace, first of all. Grace, did you have any reflections on that?
Yeah, I had quite a think about this question, and I asked a few friends as well who aren't engaged in heritage, and I kind of just wanted to put a feeler out and say, what comes to your mind when I say heritage? And all of them, you know, it wasn't what comes to my mind when I think of heritage. I think of culture and history and something that's very passionate, that I find very passionate about. But for them, it was it was thinking of English heritage and old sites. And I think that relates to the Historic Lottery Fund, you know, kick the dust. Well, it's a very keen idea of dust there. It's about changing the perceptions of as you saw, boring came up in the word clouds. Well, how can we change that and not define heritage so archaically, and how can we make it a word or a term, or even, it doesn't even need to be defined by a term. I think getting out the box is sometimes quite useful. How can we make it so that it's something that directly resonates with young people throughout the ages of young people? And you know, I think that could be done by firstly thinking about the word engage. When we think of, there was the question at the start of this debate, 16 to 24-year-olds attending heritage sites. Well, that is not obviously the only way to engage with heritage. And I think young people, they want people to recognise that they do engage via music, food culture, various other categories of heritage. And I think that we have to adapt heritage to the 21st century and relate it to current themes and topics and disassociate it from the boring and old and dusty that people do associate it with, though I'm sure none of us do.
Thanks, Grace. Anna, do you have any things to add on there? As a fellow young person on the board, you and Grace are in the, I believe you are both in the category that we're talking about today, the age bracket, the arbitrary age bracket.
Yeah, we're definitely making the most of it, aren't we? Yes, I do want to say something that is actually linked to what Grace was saying about young people equating heritage to old buildings. And when I was doing the research part of the project for New Wave, I was actually very keen to sort of debunk some myths about heritage perceptions. And I found a report from 2018 that actually asked people in general what they associate heritage with, and actually only 18% of young people said heritage equals old buildings, which personally I was very happy about, and also a little bit surprised because I thought it would be a higher percentage. And that sort of made me think more along the lines of, okay, well, I think heritage is probably more about identity, whether it's personal identity, communal identity, even a country's identity. And I would like to bring in an example of using this kind of thinking to engage young people more with heritage, which is happening in Italy actually with the Italian equivalent of the National Trust there. They have a brilliant volunteering program, which again brings some questions about accessibility and not paying people for their expertise. But what they do really well is they engage young people on a more peer-based level. So young people are in charge of programming events and curating events for other young people, engaging with them on topics around culture, whether it's Italian food, Italian fashion, Italian cinema, and always linked to heritage, whether it's having a fabulous costume party in a great manor house and everyone comes dressed up and they have Aperol spritz and everyone has a great time. And it's kind of turning it, it's making it more accessible, and it's making it more fun, and it's making it more sort of, you can touch things and you can enjoy yourself in that space and not be constrained about, this is the corridor and we have to read the panel and stuff like that. It creates more of a personal connection with the place. And I think that brings me to sort of my top recommendation in order to make heritage more accessible and more interesting, would be to use this idea of experiential. So, what Anita, I think, was saying at the beginning about science being a lot more accessible because you can have fun experiments and blow things up. Well, you can kind of do that with heritage too, if you really want to. And if everyone's on board and you're not so risk averse, you can definitely push some boundaries and have some either cool events or some cool experiments, and playing with materials and getting more tactile with techniques, for example. Who knows? There's honestly so many different ways of going about this, and definitely experiential events, potentially through partnerships, could be a great gateway for young people in this area.
Thanks, Anna. And I think there's such great points that you and Grace both make around the intangible heritage, and then also kind of diversifying what we're meaning as heritage. And I guess that's really important for this discussion today as well. I'm just thinking of my wonderful colleagues in Oxford who work in heritage science. You know, there are a lot of scientists who work in the heritage sector. We're not just talking about museum displays or kind of country house curatorship. So I think it's really brilliant points that you're making. Alison or Anita, I didn't know if you wanted to come into this question before we move on to the next one.
Well, as you can see, I'm kind of being bombarded by heritage experts at the moment. And actually, look, just because I said that about science doesn't mean I don't think heritage can be really exciting. In fact, those two, the things they've loved the best, you know, going to National Trust sites has been fabulous because that's really hands-on, both external heritage and the stuff they can touch. But something that someone said there, hello Joshua, wave to the people, we're talking about you now. One of the things they love is heritage at home, and someone's just said that there actually. Who are my parents, who are my grandparents, what are their stories? They quite often want to link that to horrible histories, which is Joshua's absolute favourite programme at the moment. So I think some of those informal ways, those experiential ways, those fun ways, do we value them enough, is my question. Do we value them enough? Or do we kind of place this in an academic box when really it is experiential, it's real, it's developing itself? And those two know more about history than I ever did, know more about heritage than I ever did, because there is so much more available nowadays. So I think we can still talk about the challenges. We've still got challenges, but horrible histories didn't exist when I was a kid. Those sites didn't exist when I was a kid. And trust me, if you went to any of those sites, you walked around nicely and quietly at those sites as well. So I want to say, yes, it's work to do, but I think even between my two eldest, who are in their 20s, and those two, there's been a massive shift. And that's due to a lot of people that are on this panel and a lot of people that are in the audience here. We've got a new generation of heritage workers that don't see it in the same way. So for you guys who are seeing this and seeing all the challenges ahead, one of the things I would say and reflect and thank you for is where we've come in the last 15 years has been massive on access to heritage. So I think there's something about getting that balance right before we beat ourselves up too much as well.
Brilliant, thank you. I think we should move on now to the next question, because I know that we're running through the time now. So Danny, I'll pass back to you.
Thanks, Alice. The next question is, we know that young people care about the environment in which they live, both the built and natural environment. But how do you think we can best their lived experience? Maybe Anita, it would be good to ask you about this first because of your experience working sort of with the environment and working with young people and engaging young people with the environment in different ways. So would you like to comment on this first?
Well, I'm conscious I was doing quite a lot, but just to say from a YHA perspective, this really is at the core of what we do. So our charitable objects are connecting people to nature and to heritage. We don't tend to separate them too much, actually. And I think that's an important first point. Our natural heritage is as important as our built heritage, for example. The stories of the land are as important as the stories of the cities. So I think there's something about recognising that rural and natural heritage and capital. But it's the same thing, isn't it? It's getting people out there. It's getting people physically into those spaces and places, which we know that both heritage and nature are good for people's well-being. We know they root them. So for me, from a YHA perspective, my job over the next couple of years is to get even more young people outside, even more young people into nature, even more young people into natural heritage and natural capital. So I don't think you can get away from the fact that physically being there is part of the need. And actually we know for the next 6 months at least, the next year, that's going to be even more hard because we know the same people who have been in, the people that aren't accessing natural heritage at the moment are the people who've been locked up in houses without gardens for the whole of lockdown. So we know we've got a really big issue here on access because the people who've accessed heritage, culture, nature the least in the last 6 months are those who need it the most and who those that we need to focus on getting outdoors for the next 6 months. So it's, you know, there's a wealth of challenges there, definitely.
Sorry, I think there's a bit of a delay on my end, so apologies. Thank you, Anita. I think that's really, really interesting. There there's a possible follow-up question as well, which is how do you think the increased awareness of climate change impacts on young people's awareness and care for the built and natural environment? So I wondered if any of the panelists had an insight into this, or the sort of the main question around young people and engaging in the natural environment.
We've been running a project at Kids in Museums this year with our youth panel, using objects from museum collections to explore the climate emergency. And I think what's actually been surprising is how many aspects of heritage are relevant to the climate emergency, and whether it's like ways people made things, how the landscape has changed. I think it's kind of knitting the two together has sort of made them understand the importance of heritage and what how the past can potentially shape our responses to the climate emergency in the future. So I think it's been kind of a really important learning experience for us, and something I'd like to see more museums and heritage organisations doing with their collections, because I think it's a really great way into raising awareness of sort of positive solutions to the climate emergency.
Yeah, absolutely. Grace, did you want to chip in?
Yeah, just from recent relatable experience, I think that climate is something that so many young people are passionate about, and then hearing the intersections with heritage, of which there are so many, is a really good way of starting conversations. I think climate is something that a lot of young people know a lot about and are very interested in, and to connect that to heritage is a really good way of hearing their voice and hearing what they have to say. We did a recent roundtable with Europa Nostra about climate change and heritage and how it can have an impact, and the passion of the young people that were on that discussion was fantastic, and they came up with some really, really useful and really good ideas. They are thinking vastly about innovation and how heritage, innovation and climate change can all work together to improve people's well-being and preserve the planet as we know it for the future, really. So I think it's certainly useful. It's a good intersection to the two topics, and they so strongly align.
Sorry, I think I missed the end. Right, silly internet connection today. So apologies if the viewing is a bit off for anyone watching. Yeah, I completely agree, and I think it's really important that we do think about those kinds of innovative practices, and really thinking about innovation alongside a lot of the problems actually I think that face the sector at the moment, and how young people can be involved in those. I think very much related to that, we have a really brief video from our sponsors, Ecclesiastical Insurance, and they've done a recent survey of 2018 to 30-year-olds, which is fantastic, from across the UK, to see how they engage with heritage, how they prefer to spend their free time, and what would make them visit heritage sites more often. And I now invite all the speakers to leave their screens on whilst this is playing, and we're going to leave their screens off rather, while we play the video, so you can grab a glass of water if you wanted to as well. And we'll be back in a few minutes.
Good afternoon, I'm Faith Kitchen and I'm Heritage Director for Ecclesiastical Insurance. I am delighted to be supporting the Heritage Alliance's debate on youth and heritage, and I also want to share with you the findings from our recent youth and heritage research study. Engaging the next generation we know is critical to the sustainability and development of the sector. So we wanted to learn how youth engage with heritage, what the barriers are and what the opportunities might be. So we surveyed, using one poll, 2,000 18 to 30-year-olds across the UK. I'm going to share our key findings with you now. So one of the first things we found was that young people prefer to stay in and watch TV or use social media than go out and visit a museum, gallery or theatre. So we also found that 48% of young people never visit stately homes, and that drops to 36% for galleries, 33% for castles, 24% never visit theatres, and only 19% never visit museums. So there's an opportunity definitely to engage more widely with a broader set of young people. We also asked young people what really deters you from visiting. And there were 3 strong and clear answers and responses here. First one, the perception that heritage is boring. Secondly, the distance involved in travelling to heritage attractions. And thirdly, the cost of visiting was also seen as a barrier. Another really interesting and perhaps unexpected finding for us through this research as well was that there was a clear gender gap, with young men being far less likely to visit heritage buildings or attractions than women. Another key finding was that many young people surveyed had never actually visited heritage organisations as a child, and we found that people who were not taken to visit as a child were far less likely to visit as adults. As an example of this, 60% of those who visited museums as children now visit as adults at least once a year, whilst a huge 69% of those surveyed who never visited as children don't go as adults now either. We also asked young people what would make you go and visit heritage, and we got a broad variety of answers back, but the main ones are here ahead. So more food and drink options, more hands-on activities, as well as a greater variety of events, and really importantly, cheaper tickets. Another key finding was that technology has a huge part to play in engaging more young adults with the UK's heritage. In our survey, if they were made available during the next visit, young adults said they would use VR headsets, digital displays and interactive apps on their phones. 52% of those surveyed as well, and of those who'd visited a heritage organisation online, said the digital experience inspired them to want to visit in person. We also found our research that over a third, so 34%, said a good online presence would encourage them to share their experiences on social media. And we know from other research that the pandemic has accelerated the heritage sector's thinking around digital and upskilling the sector through things like the Heritage Alliance Digital Skills Programme. But we also did find in a more recent survey that young people shun future visits to heritage attractions over coronavirus fears. So a third of 18 to 30s are less likely to visit theatres in person post-lockdown, and 28% are less likely to visit stately homes, whilst a quarter are less likely to visit galleries, castles and museums. Although there was some good news as well. 2/5 of young adults who visited a heritage attraction online during lockdown said they would be willing to pay to access these if they were no longer free. So perhaps that's an opportunity for the sector.
Thanks everyone for watching that. I think, you know, these are really, really interesting insights and underpinning a lot of our thinking alongside a lot of the insights that were shared in the blogs as well. So we're really, really thinking about some of this data. We've got another set of questions to ask on the panel, and then we'll be opening up to Q&A after that. So please do continue to add your questions into the Q&A box and your thoughts into the chat box. It's been really interesting reading your thoughts so far. So I'll pass on to Alice to ask the next question.
Thanks, Danny. And just following on actually from that, from Faith's presentation, this next question is around technology. So does technology or digital opportunities offer the best avenue for engaging young people in heritage into the future? And I wonder whether, Anna, you might be willing to respond to that first and foremost, as technology is obviously a big part of your role and your skill set.
Yes, I'm so passionate about this, honestly, please stop me. Definitely, I think it's so great to actually have had that clip beforehand, when they say, you know, so few young people are considering engaging with heritage sites. And what do they like to do? They like to sit on social media, or they like to use TV, like, you know, just hang out and have that kind of entertainment. So I think this is where digital has such big potential, in the sense of, let's use the challenge in order to channel young people into the sector more engagingly and in a different manner, and basically sort of get them on the home turf. And I think that's where the power of social media really lies. And it's something that definitely has been propelled into the spotlight this year during lockdown, obviously, and it's when sort of all the hidden problems of dealing with engaging young people on social media came out, in the sense that, you know, you have to have a very authentic voice in order for that to work. You have to sort of pivot your presence and your visuals towards what young people enjoy and what kind of content they like to consume. And it is very time consuming, I'm not gonna lie. It's not easy, it's not a one-time thing. It's not like you can have a social media strategy that will drive thousands of young people to your site overnight. But it's definitely something worth investing in, because it's about, well, I think it's about future-proofing the heritage sector around engaging more young people. And I think it's a brilliant gateway, and a very accessible gateway to having higher youth engagement in the sector, definitely.
Thanks, Anna. And I wondered if there are any particular organisations that you think are doing this really well already, and actually maybe to our audience, if you want to share in the chat box, maybe examples of organisations in the cultural sector, and maybe other sectors too, who are really engaging with younger audiences in a you know, meaningful way. That would be interesting to see.
So I've got 3 examples. Various levels of conventionality there. The first one would be the Royal Academy on Instagram and on Twitter particularly. They have a great voice, very authentic, very humorous, but without being risky in any way. And they have some really, really great engagement, and it's skyrocketed over the past few months. On Twitter, I would say as well, the Texas Cowboy Museum. It sounds very random, but trust me, it's great content. And the recipe, I would say, to their success was that they handed over their Twitter to, I want to say he's the invigilator of the museum. He had no idea how to use Twitter, and it made it so endearing, because he didn't know how to use hashtags, etc. And it became viral basically, because everyone thought it was hilarious. And so many young people joined in the conversation. I think they recently published some numbers as well that attest to the fact that more young people have been going to the museum when it was open. So there's definitely one to watch there. And I would say on TikTok, which is not something that I think is very talked about in this industry particularly. I think there's a lot of fears around GDPR and safety and etc. But one example of sort of being very good with the new platform and sort of jumping in early on a new trend would be the Uffizi Gallery in Italy, who have made a TikTok account very early on, and they have a massive following. They do all the trends and then just flip them to art and culture and heritage. And I think as well, they had around 30% more young people visiting their galleries as a result. So those are great numbers, and the investment is probably very low if you consider how much you'd have to pay for advertising having someone do social media and having a young person do social media in order to attract other young people is probably a smarter return on your investment.
Great, thanks Anna, and I can see that others have both been echoing your sentiments about the Cowboy Museum and also adding some other suggestions, so that's great, thank you. Alison, I wonder whether you might have any reflections, or any of the other panellists?
Yeah, so couple of things. First of all, sort of during the first lockdown, struck by how museums were engaging with social media and gaming platforms. So National Museum Wales did a really great project in Minecraft where kids could build and kit out their own museums in Minecraft, and they were absolutely amazing, seeing what they thought should and shouldn't be in a museum. And I also found the museum and Animal Crossing really interesting, and the organisations that you can now go on the Met Museum in New York's website, for example, and if it's got a little unicorn icon by the picture of the collection, you can get a QR code and scan it and put it in your Animal Crossing museum. So I thought those things are quite cool sort of ways to have kind of chance encounters with little bits of heritage. The other thing I wanted to say on the total contrary is I think it's really important to remember that people still want to encounter the real sometimes as well, and digital shouldn't be 100% of the focus with young people. I echo exactly what Anna has said. It's really important and it's a really great way of engagement, but it shouldn't be the only thing.
Thank you. Anita or Grace, did you have any did you want to respond to these before we move to the next question?
Yeah, I just quickly just wanted to say that whilst technology is a great foot in the door for a lot of organisations and digital tech, and I think that is primarily because young people can tend to be the expert in those things, or perceived as the expert, and that's not to generalise or stereotype, but that that shouldn't be the only avenue in. And I think what often happens is people, they do these part-time temporary projects, digital and communications, especially technology, and then the fellow colleagues or fellow volunteers go, hey, you've got a really valuable voice, these are great ideas, wow, okay. And it's then that they recognise their potential for more longer term employment. But is there a flaw in that thinking? It's beneficial, yes, and it is a way for young people to get involved in heritage and to be the experts, but it also is a bit worrying that that's the only way for them to be recognised and to have a voice. So I do question that it's not just the best opportunity. I wouldn't want it to be called the only opportunity.
That's a really important point to make, and it's perhaps quite a lazy approach to just go straight in with the digital offer and not think more creatively about that wider institutional change that everybody's been talking about.
Can I just really quickly one point on that, just really fast? One of the things we're looking at a lot with early childhood and cultural inclusion is the school space, the home space, and the cultural setting space, heritage space. And there's something about how all three of those balance together. So digital can help connect all of those. Digital can help at home, but people still want to touch things. So there's been a lot of really good success with schools loaning out boxes that they've got from heritage sites that then have helped kids access stuff at home, help skill the parents up. So there's something about how we get that holy trinity almost of site, school, and home sorted out. And I think digital with real life products, with visits, is the combination. I think the danger is if we think that any one of those is the silver bullet. So I also would love to know the Twitter account for the Museum of Cowboys, because that would really please my children imminently. So if someone can post that in the chat, that would be a heavy bonus for them, having not got their mother for the last 2 hours. So thank you.
Great, I think someone's going to do it straight away in a second. I'm just going to hand over now to Danny, who has another question, and then I think after this one we'll open up to the Q&A that we've got in the box. Over to you, Danny.
Thanks, Alice. So our final question is, how can we better engage a diverse range of young voices in the heritage workforce? And how can we make the first touch point with the sector for new heritage professionals more attractive. So I know that this is definitely something that Alice and I are quite close to, and we're wondering what some of the panellists think. Maybe Anita, would you like to come in on this first?
Yeah, I think, so this is really important. We're looking at this in nature and environment as well at YHA. I think part of that is, look, I was a working class kid from an estate in Brighton. I didn't know what the word heritage was. The only graduate jobs I'd ever considered were teacher, because that's the only graduate I'd ever met. So I think there's something here about exposure. We keep saying that, isn't there? Right? The 4 young people that spoke earlier talked about their exposure to it. You've talked about your exposure to it. If people don't know there are jobs in heritage and arts, and I'm 53, and I think I was probably about 40 when I realised there was jobs in heritage and arts, and I'm quite clever and have multiple degrees. So I think we have to expose young people to those things. And looking at the ecclesiastical report, a lot of people have never been to those settings. So if they haven't been to those settings, they won't see that there are curators, they won't see that there are jobs, they won't see that there are things in that field. So I would argue there's a lot we can do about jobs, entry-level degrees, apprenticeships. Kickstart provides us a massive opportunity to get young people in an entry level. But I would keep coming back to exposure, because if you don't see it, you can't be it. And if you can't see it in someone who looks like you as well, who talks like you as well, then you can't be it. And you know why I wouldn't have entered into heritage? Was because I wasn't posh enough. Right? I wasn't posh enough. I was a girl from an estate. So I just want to be really clear here that we have to be really careful about how we present it, how we show a range of voices, which I think you do brilliantly here today, and how we expose young people to those careers and jobs. And then let's look at the ways that we craft the jobs to suit young people.
Yeah, definitely. I think that point about exposure, but also just being able to offer something that seems appealing and actually understanding how to communicate things is really, really vital for this point. I wonder, Grace, did you want to come in next on this one?
Yeah. I mean, I really echo Anita's thoughts there. I couldn't agree more that, you know, I certainly, from personal experience, have felt the same thing. And I think the way to solve that, not just big statements, but action, is to stop relying so much on volunteers and voluntary placements at a key age. I think I personally, you know, I've been employed since I was 14, and to have time to volunteer would have been simply impossible. Getting access to a volunteer site, also quite impossible. And so if there are barriers to young people being involved in heritage, then it's impossible for them to get involved. And then you get a narrow category and a narrow field of people that can be involved. And so I think, firstly, I think we need to value young people's contribution as an employee, not just as a volunteer. And then you will see that there are more young people in heritage, and then that will just be a cyclical effect of people seeing other young people in heritage and going, hey, I could do that job, that's something that I could do. And I think, you know, again, back to the idea of visibility, not just showing this on websites or via email newsletters, but showing it on social media, on podcasts and Netflix, and channels and streams of communication that young people are likely to see, and to visually give voice to young people is incredibly important. And coming more onto the workforce, thinking about how we can make it more attractive, I think that comes down again to being open, and for the workforce feeling like a safe space as well is really important. And you are more likely to feel encouraged in a workforce if there are people surrounded by you who are similar ages, or at least one other person would probably make you more confident and feel more secure and valued. And certainly, you know, I think that there's so many issues with the working sector in general, in the whole, you need work experience to get a job, but you can't get a job because you don't have work experience. And so by being party to that effect, by being approaching schools local to you, if you are a museum or a site or an organisation, and saying, hey, we have this opportunity, you need to do nothing except find a student who wants to do it, and that is it. Because teachers are overworked and they don't have time to look it all up. And I think that's how we can kind of break that down, get work experience at a young age, and then leave at 18 with experience and be seen as a valued employee worth paying, not just using for voluntary hours.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that idea of engaging young people, and especially from quite a young age, segues nicely into maybe asking Alison what you think about this as well.
So I think there are lots of different things going on here, and everything everyone has said so far I would agree with. We have to make the sector a good employer. It has to be a good career. It has to not be a risk to try and pursue a career in heritage. I am white, middle class and Oxbridge educated, but I could not rely on my family at all to support me financially after the age of probably 16. So it was still a risk for me to pursue this career, and I'm very privileged. So I think that has to be sorted out. So all the things about unpaid volunteering, unpaid work experience, everything like that. Certainly thinking about people considering careers in heritage, there's got to be awareness of the type of jobs you can do in heritage, and that's why we run Takeover Day with Kids in Museums, get young people into museums and heritage organisations to see the full range of jobs that are going on. So it sees you can work in retail and heritage, you can be a conservation scientist, you can be a social media manager. So I think that's really important to create the sense that it's a whole workforce. It's not just about being a curator or a historian. And I think also we need to think about how those careers are accessible. Leeds City Museums have been doing a great piece of work about heritage careers for SEND young people. And I think initiatives like that are really important to broadening the workforce. And yeah, I think museums and other heritage organisations thinking about who they partner with to bring people in for things like Takeover Day. So it's not just reaching the usual suspects, it's not just reaching the schools that are already keen. So it's bringing those careers to a wider audience. But in order for that to be okay, we've got to fix the careers as well and make them careers that everyone would want.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much to everyone on those questions. I think this has been a really interesting discussion, and we could keep going for a really long time. I definitely could say lots and lots about all of these things as well in my own experiences. But I think in the interest of time, we're going to start on the Q&A, because there's so much that people have been asking as well. So it would be brilliant to hear from some of the people who are joining us here today as well. Alice, would you like to introduce the Q&A?
Absolutely. So we've had a number of questions submitted before the event, but as it says on your screen now, you can also add Q&A. You can also add questions in the Q&A box below, and you can upvote those that you would particularly like to hear discussed. And I know there's a lot of questions that we've had already that are on similar themes, so we can hopefully do our best in grouping them. But I'm just going to ask the first question, which is a pre-submitted question that's very much about the here and now and the impact of COVID actually on what we're talking about. So the question is, how can small organisations find the staff time and resources to focus on young people at a time of crisis? Yes, they are the future, but surely the focus must now be on the present. And I think just to link that question also to the points that were being made earlier about governance and young trustees on boards, and you know, a genuine question to our panel of, you know, is now the time to bring in a younger trustee, maybe when you might have a board who are looking for particular expertise around risk management or financial management. Yeah, so quite a big topic to unpick there. And would anybody like to answer that around how can organisations support young people at a time of crisis? Grace, I see you've unmuted yourself. Grace, would you be willing? And then we'll go to Anita afterwards. Anita and her brilliant children afterwards.
Yeah, I think this question is slightly worrying. That saying the solely focused being on young people is divergent to earning money and risk management. Well, actually, I think what we should have all learned, and what I'm sure we all have in the last year, is that young people, digital technology, as Anna so rightly put, is the way that a lot of organisations in heritage have managed to continue producing content and getting followers, and people who, when their sites are open, would likely come and visit again, or even signing up to a mailing list and knowing that there's an event happening next year because they saw something online over the last 9 months. So I think actually, I would say now is the time to engage young people. They've lost their apprenticeships, they've lost their jobs. They are the largest sector to have lost their job due to coronavirus across the board, just age range. And so they might have free time, or they might be like, I don't want to work in this sector anymore. I really would like to, I've seen this on Instagram, I want to work in heritage. So I would say now is the time to think about how you can engage a young person into your workforce or your voluntary, if that's how you are based. And I think that it shouldn't be seen as divergent, it should be seen as together. How can a young person help you to continue making money now that you have to change the way that you earn money? I think that's something, yeah.
Great point, Grace, absolutely. Anita, did you want to join on that question?
Yeah, I'm trying to balance juggling children here as well. So look, I'm responsible for YHA's income and impact. I'm responsible for both. That's 50 million quid turnover, 30 million quid hit this year. That's pretty harsh. 11 million quid net. So that's big. But at the same time, I'm also responsible for our reach targets, for how we reach and engage young people. And I don't see them as either or. I see them as both and. So for us, continuing to engage young people, in fact, continuing down the access route this year, is in part about the more people that know about us, the more people that will pay and stay with us. It's attached to income. 25% of our workforce broadly is under 26. We know that's been hit. We've been better than most, but we've still been hit. So looking at how we continue to develop people's new skills, new jobs, new roles, really important. We launched a whole bunch of digital volunteering opportunities during this process that are UX experiences, where we are working with supporting young people on short-term placements for their DV and others, Duke of Edinburgh Award and others, where they can help us look at our user experiences, our digital pathways. That's massively of value to us and to them. We're also looking at Kickstart and how we use Kickstart funding to diversify our workforce for next year, which will include some stuff around heritage and activities in the environment. So there are multiple things we can do that are around income, that are around our organisation sustainability, and are still around young people. And I don't buy it, because if the first thing that goes as soon as the purse is tight or things are difficult is access, you didn't mean it in the first place. So I'm pretty clear on that, and indeed bullish on it. And I'm really proud to be part of an organisation that even with that hit has still said no, diversity and inclusion and access and young people are still our priority.
Thanks, Anita. And I think
I can hear mine breaking things in the kitchen imminently.
But I think those points that you've both made, this isn't the time to turn your back on those things. If anything, it's the time to start doing them. And I'm sure for a lot of the institutions, people listening in on this event, I'm sure it's been an ambition on your to-do list, but maybe this is the time to action those. Perhaps we'll have a call to arms after this. Daniella, I wondered, would you like to go on to the next question? Because I'm very conscious of time and we've got a long list of questions from our audience.
Absolutely, and I think maybe my slight delay isn't helping with the time, so apologies. Our next question is very related, around workforce and accessibility, and are there any good examples of involving working class young people meaningfully in heritage by giving them paid or truly accessible opportunities, bearing in mind that not everyone can afford to work unpaid, something we've touched on before. I wonder if you'd like to come in on this first. Just start speaking if I can't see that your video is on.
I think both the new museum school and museum futures traineeships have done this really well. They've provided a year of supported paid training with a qualification attached to it in partner museums, and those trainees are now going on to make their way in cultural organisations. We actually employ one of them at Kids in Museums, so I think that's been a really great scheme and a really good example of bringing people who don't necessarily have degrees or sort of the background that you normally find in the heritage workforce into the sector.
If I could add an example, which may not be particularly heritage, but I think it's a really great example overall, and I would genuinely urge everyone to go and look it up, because there's a wealth of materials around the framework of doing this and how it came to be. But Take Collective was and still is a really great program, which lets young people curate and co-create events for other young people, as well as generating income, because obviously all these events are paid. So what they managed to do is get more money in and sort of diversify their revenue streams through engaging young people. And they also do pay their young creators. So I think it's a really great example. And what really sets them apart, I think, is the fact that they've worked in partnership. So, you know, they kind of said, look, we're not experts at this, so we're gonna use partnerships in order to reach that audience that we want to reach. And they work particularly with young people from underrepresented backgrounds, basically. And it creates such a rich dynamic and really complements the mission of the organization really well.
Yeah, I really agree. And I think there are quite a few questions around this topic. One related question was from Andrew Henderson, who said, what can we do as museum and heritage professionals to make a career in our sector more attractive as a prospect for young people, particularly those from less privileged backgrounds? There was also a bit of an addition to that question, which is around location as well, and where people are located across the sector, and how to engage young people from all across the UK. So did anyone want to come in on that one?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that kind of further to some of the points I've already said. Another thing that I think, as Anna quite rightly said in her example, it's not, and this kind of links back to the first question about asking for young people's advice. I think it's about giving confidence and pride to a role, even if it's a short-term thing, such as organising an event, saying, this is yours, we trust you. If you need advice, if you need support, which is really important as well, please come to us. But otherwise, thank you, you've done a fantastic job, and we respect that. I was at a talk the other day and someone said, it's really nice to have something to say because I've always been, years of being called junior or early, and I don't think we need to always put a prerequisite to that. You know, your voice doesn't need to be, you don't need to pre-warn someone that you're young. Your voice should be just as valued, and the things that you say should be just as valued. And I think that's really important. If you are given pride in your work in the sector, you're, for one, more likely to be a lifelong supporter, but you're also more likely, to stay involved in the sector. And I think getting more people to see that and to be involved is a really good way of interesting people in the sector and attracting people to work in there.
Sorry, Alice, were you going to add something?
Oh yeah, no, that's all good. I was going to come in with another question actually. Danny mentioned about the kind of national perspective, but we've got a really great question here from Catherine Leonard, Secretary General of the International National Trust Organisations, INTO. And Catherine's question is, does the panel have examples of from other countries where heritage NGOs are doing youth engagement really well, which we could learn from? And I'm just thinking there about maybe digital volunteering. I think, Anita, you mentioned that you've been trialling, and whether this is something you're opening up to people outside of the UK.
Yeah, I think one of the things we're looking at, so we are looking at that digital volunteering for us as part of an international network as well. So Hosteling International is in every country broadly, some variant of it. So one of the things we are looking is at how we can have those exchanges of volunteering experience, how we can look at people moving between countries again when countries open up again. What I'm interested in, though, some people on the chat mentioned some of the things that are happening in other countries. For example, someone mentioned the money giving away idea in Italy seems to be working quite well already there. So I'm quite interested in learning what other countries are doing and where is that captured. Did British Council capture it? Is it a role for the Alliance? Where is that international best practice captured the best? Because it's something we're quite keen to learn from. We certainly contribute to from YHA and Hustling International. But where is that kind of owned across the piece? And it's something I don't know the answer to.
A great call there for the Alliance maybe to do a future project on international engagement projects. Does anyone else have any other examples? And also anyone watching to now, do you have any examples to put into the chat? It'd be really useful to see. Alison and Anna, you're unmuted.
Yeah, if I could invoke a really great example from my own country in Romania, where heritage is in dire need of funding and more people, and it's a completely different story to what English heritage is like. But we've got a really great association here, for example, who during lockdown has completely sort of changed its activity. So for example, you could do guided walks and you can add content yourself. So you create basically a heritage walk in your neighborhood by curating the content yourself and adding information yourself. They've also started a I would say volunteer campaign. Basically, they need to chart all 90,000 buildings that are at risk in the city, which authorities are not concerned about for some reason. And they've basically asked young people to go out with their smartphones and take pictures of the buildings that they've mapped out. And in this way, they're able in 3 months to chart all the buildings in the city by using citizens. Basically, it's a really great example of everyone coming together and lending a helping hand, while also, you know, getting out there and exploring their city, exploring different areas. And I think it's a great way of sort of us helping them, but also them giving something back to us. And I think this is where digital comes in really handy, unfortunately. It's definitely not the be all end all. And I agree with some of the points made earlier, that it's basically a gateway, but in so many ways it can be an enabler for change, and it can be an enabler for getting more young people involved.
Great, thanks. And we've had, thanks for that, Anna. We've had some comments in the chat while you were speaking. So apparently the Dutch Waterline is a project that's worth looking at. The Australian Museum in Sydney is doing some brilliant work, and another plug for some work the Heritage Alliance has done on the international report that was published in 2018 that you know, would have some examples in there. So that is definitely one to have a look at related to that question. Daniella, over to you.
Thanks, Alice. Our next question is very much related to digital, and Nicholas Miller's asked, how is digital transforming the experiential element of heritage for both built and natural heritage? I think we touched on this earlier in the discussion, thinking about the natural environment and heritage as part of the environment, which is definitely something that we've been advocating for as part of the Alliance. So I wonder if anyone wanted to think about digital and in terms of creating the experience for both built heritage and the natural environment.
Yeah, I think I had to think about that, a similar question, when I was thinking about heritage that stood out to me as a younger person. And I think experiential is a really good term, and it can certainly be related as well to, say, emotional. And I think what we have found is that people's past experiences as a young person do influence the way you think for the remainder of your life. And if you have a positive view of museums, as Alison pointed out, you will then think positively of them when you're older. And I think relating to experiential, I think of things like the dungeons, you know, the chains, about making history very interactive, very immersive. And I've been to several exhibitions and museums where they've not just put pictures and plaques on the wall. You've had to sit in a room and they've turned on lights. I think the Dublin City Museum is, I think that's its name anyway, is a fantastic example of this. There's almost nothing in the rooms, and what is left is sign points of what was once there, and they've not tried to recreate anything. But what they have done is capture oral history and play it as you sit inside, capture dark rooms, capture poetry and lighting. And I think using multimedia is a way of making digital, of making heritage experiential and have a lasting impact on you. Particularly, I think at teen years, you know, having haunted houses at historic properties is a really good way of making them feel, of making an experience and an emotional connection, which is so important for creating the lifelong supporters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that touches on a really interesting point on, I guess, the earlier discussion about how you bring digital or how you bring online engagement together with that kind of experience and creating experiences for all visitors as well as young people. And I think there's a really nice crossover there about thinking about how to create those kinds of really immersive, maybe more authentic experiences through doing something that's quite creative and innovative thinking with sort of different audiences in mind. So that's a really good point. Did anyone else have something to add on that before we move on to the next question? Okay, we'll head on to the next one. Alice, do you want to go for it?
Yes, and depending on yeah, how you find this question, actually, I think it's going to be an interesting one for you. This may actually be our last question, but here goes. So Andrew Hadley has asked, there has been a lot of talk this evening about the how, but could the panel say more about why young people should be engaged with or by heritage and heritage organisations? So, you know, we've made some huge assumptions here this evening that we all think young people should be engaged, but I guess the question is, from your perspectives, you know, what is the why, not just the how? Who would like to come in first?
I don't mind having an attempt at that. And excuse me for just I'll turn the mic back on and the video back on because my children have stopped tearing each other apart briefly. So look, people said it earlier, one is fun. Let's just not lose that. Let's not lose that amongst all the academic and important and value-laden pieces. It's fun. Engaging with heritage is fun. The second piece, though, is, you said it earlier, and we kept saying it, we kept coming back to it. He, generally, white male, who holds the pen, generally rules the world. And it's important that we get different versions of heritage. And to get different versions of heritage and different voices, we need people to understand it and value it. If they value the past, they better understand and respond to the present. So for me, that engagement with heritage piece is because it helps us better understand our current context too. My eldest is studying politics. Yet a lot of what she's studying isn't politics at all. It's heritage. It's how things happened. It's when it happened. It's who influenced that. So I think we need to recognise the fun piece, but we need to recognise it is about our contemporary context. It is about who we are, how we behave, what we do now, the decisions we make now are all informed by our collective heritage and by our individual heritage. And the third piece, look, we are facing, aren't we, increasing polarisation in society? We are. We're not going to fix that with heritage. In fact, if anything, heritage might stir that up a little bit more. But at least it's honest, it's a dialogue. And if we can figure out the things that are our differences in our heritage, we can also figure out the things that are our connections. So, like I say, fun, understanding our current context and decision making, but also as a route to proper connection. I think heritage is, for the many meanings of the word, is definitely something we need to value much more in the current context.
Thanks, Anita. Alison or Grace or Anna, do you have a kind of, from your perspectives, a why?
I think probably quite a lot of what Anita has already said. I know at the moment that a lot of things seem very polarised, but I think heritage is a brilliant way to build empathy because it's about connecting with multiple people's points of view and trying to understand them and be alongside them. And I think that's massively lacking in society at the moment. So that would be fairly high up my list. I also think there's something really important about being in public space and the role that heritage has in sort of our public space. And I think we need to understand heritage, we need to understand the space that we're in, and we need to enable people to be part of that space and shape it in the future. So understand that it doesn't always stay the same, there's an evolution. And I also think that as well as fun, there are benefits for well-being, but I also think there are potentially benefits for kind of how people participate in civil society, and sort of understanding sort of how our society came to being, and how that if you have rights, you also have responsibilities. I think a lot of that comes from heritage and understanding how that evolves. I think that's really important too.
Thanks, Alison. Grace and Anna, do either of you have anything to throw in there around the why, from your perspective, from the work you do as young people working in the heritage sector, and also being very engaged with it in addition to your kind of employed status?
Yeah, I think I'll just highlight something Victoria said in the chat. Young people are just people at the beginning of their lives. They will become middle-aged and the elderly one day. And I think that is quite well put, that why should we engage young people? Well, because they are the future. They're the people that are going to be here in 10, 20, 30, 50 years. And so engaging them now is better than engaging them when they've had to make that career change, like Anita said. Engaging them now when they could perhaps build up more experience and excel to roles with stronger voices and more opportunity to have a stronger voice is easier to do. If you're starting young, then you can excel sooner. And I think that's, it's really important. I'm not surprised that someone would ask why, but I almost kind of am. Of course, why should you not? It's incredibly important. And someone earlier in the chat said heritage on your doorstep, and that people don't realise that, and that is so true. And I think engaging young people in heritage is the way of making heritage shift and become ready for the future and adapting to the future, and being the place that people still take their children to have fun in the museums in 10, 15, 20 years time. That involves involving those young people now, because they are, like I said, the future.
Great, thanks, Grace. And Anna, did you want to add anything?
So there's so many things to add, it's like you don't even know where to start. I think it's definitely reasonable to ask why, but I think it's also very important to acknowledge how much broader this conversation is happening today, and especially this year. I feel like this question has come up a lot more, and it's great to see. And I would have a sort of twofold answer. I think the why, in terms of why organizations should target young people and should work towards getting more young people involved, is simply because it's the smart thing to do. They will be the people there to sort of take over heritage one day, and it's all about passing it down in this sector. So the sooner you get them involved, the more safe and the more prepared you will be for the future. It's not about sort of just getting by, it's about always innovating, always being up to date, always looking forward to the future. And I think young people are definitely a really great way to do that. In terms of why young people themselves should be involved with heritage, I would say that it's because, and maybe I'm biased and I'm basing this on my own experience, but heritage is one of those things that is such a melting pot of different skills and different sectors. And I think this is really the beauty of it. And it's where so much value can be drawn. And I keep going on about partnerships, but it's because I believe in them so much. I feel like heritage is really at the intersection of so many things, from science to architecture to climate change to innovation to technology to digital. Honestly, anything can be merged with heritage, and it's such a valuable and such an enriching experience for a young person to be involved in. I think it really develops your character, really develops your skills. You're hyper exposed to everything, and it really prepares you, I feel like. And it's something that needs to be communicated probably a bit more, so young people feel less uneasy about choosing a career in heritage.
Thanks, Anna. I'm very conscious that we're at the end of our time now for the discussions, but I just wondered if any of our panelists had a kind of a last kind of thought they wanted to share, or a suggestion to people watching who maybe haven't felt that confident in the past of engaging young people. Anything you want to see in the next few years, or maybe an immediate action you'd love people to take. Does anyone have a final point that they would like to make?
Just quickly, if I will, I know you're probably tired of hearing my voice by now, but someone was saying in the chat that they really want to involve young people, but they just won't engage back. And to that, I have to say, think outside the box. Do not try and channel and engage and contact young people through traditional methods used by people of an older generation, because that won't work and they won't see it. And if they don't know it exists, then they cannot engage and they cannot respond. So I would say, if you are targeting young people, do it proactively and look into the best communication streams. And also echoing what I said about schools, teachers are incredibly underfunded and do not have the time necessarily to source placements. So making it easy, making it simple and putting yourself out there, it's a mutual benefit if you can get young people involved, not least for the future of your organisation, but also for funding. A lot of funding is aimed at young people and getting them involved, and it is possible. It's not too difficult to do. Reach out to people that have young members in their organisation. The SPAB, for example, have a volunteering list, a mailing list. They have a jobs mailing list. They also advertise all of this on social media as well. So just have a look, and just if you really want to get young people involved, I guarantee it's easier than it seems, and it is possible because there are young people who would be wildly interested in being involved.
Great, thanks, Grace. Alison, a headline thought. We have about 2 minutes, but for all of you, so really quick headline thought would be great.
My headline thought would be flipping it round, not thinking about the young people as hard to reach, but maybe that heritage might be hard to reach. And I always try and think about it as something that I would find really difficult and unfamiliar to do. So when I'm thinking about it, I think about how I would feel going to a boxing match, and maybe thinking about heritage in those terms rather than something that's really familiar and comfortable, which it probably is if you work in it.
Thanks, Alison, that's perfect. Anita?
I think I'm going to be really controversial here today, which is never something I do. I say let's make it a little bit less pretentious, right? Let's find it a little bit less big words, lots of big words, not quite as many as the environment sector, a little bit less about degrees and qualifications, so that's really, really important. A little bit more around the excitement and fun, but actually not losing the serious part, but it is, as you so eloquently, those of you who work in the field have said, absolutely at the interface of everything. So make it accessible, allow people to make mistakes as well. Some of that, it's fine, actually, Braveheart, get that. It's always used as the example, but allow people to have views around heritage that they get wrong because they haven't quite got the facts right, or they haven't quite seen it in the round, or they haven't had the privilege of having so much experience, and allow them to have that, allow them to play with it and allow them to practice it. I think that would be my general guidance. Have fun with it.
Thanks, Anita. And Anna, one last headliner from you before we close up.
This works really well because it's a call to action. Stop thinking and just do it. I think it's such a scary thing at the beginning, but it's just a matter of getting started, trying, and then adapting as you go along. It probably won't be perfect from the first get-go, but it will definitely be an improvement. Every little thing helps. So getting started, I think, is my main takeaway.
Thanks, Anna. So unfortunately, we have to wrap up the event now, as we've come to an end. But please do continue the conversation on Twitter. We'd really love to know your thoughts. If you can tag @heritage_NGOs and use the hashtag heritage debate, and also young people and heritage. We'd love to keep discussing with you. Hopefully you've made some good connections in the chat that you could carry on social media. And I think, you know, for me, it's been so useful listening in and hearing our brilliant panelists. And I think the big takeaway for me is the importance of bringing young people in to the decision making at every level, and especially that point around governance and consultation, not just being a nice to have, but it's something that's embedded into the kind of the DNA of your organisation. So thank you. Over to Danny, who's going to wrap up the session for us.
Thanks, Alice, and thanks to all our panelists. That was really, really exciting, really interesting discussion, and I think definitely what we wanted to do as an alliance, as an organisation, the Heritage Alliance. I think we're constantly thinking about, I guess this is what the idea behind this whole event is, the Heritage Debate every year. It's the start of a conversation, and although those 2 hours seem to zip by, we really want to continue to have these discussions and really continue to think about these issues and these topics. I think they're really, really important in the sector, especially at the moment. Definitely from my perspective, I think really thinking about the idea of risk and, as Anna said at the end, just taking action, just trying, not feeling that, you know, a mistake or something that maybe didn't go so well isn't something to be shared and learned from. And I think that's something we can all really definitely think about in our practice. I think that was really fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone who's watched, either on Facebook or directly with us, or someone who's going to watch the recording. And thank you to everyone who's participated as well, and in the chat too, and with the questions. It's really, really brilliant. We hope discussions and presentations were helpful and insightful. I would say that we're a charity, so if you enjoyed the event and you didn't donate with your ticket, then maybe consider donating. And you can also think about joining the Alliance as a member, or an individual supporter, and add your voice to ours. And I would say that I think Joe mentioned as well in the chat that we're looking for new trustees, so please share the word about that, and if you're interested, please let us know. That'd be absolutely fantastic. On a note, a final note on feedback. So when you close the webinar, you'll be presented with a survey, and please fill it in if you're able, and your feedback will help us to plan future events, especially if we're likely to be delivering online for a little bit longer. Our next event coming up is Heritage Day, which will be in February. We'd love to see lots of you then. Thanks again for watching, and have a lovely evening. Bye.